oh God, do I do it? I was like, I can't not do it.
Yeah.
You know, like I would kick myself. I let this opportunity go. Like, no way. I made that decision in a heartbeat. If you're not going to do it, are you okay with never knowing what would have happened? Don't go foolishly. Go in eyes wide open, understand where you might fall down, and then be brave enough to go anyway. Number one, if you're going into a saturated category, you need to find the niche that's underserviced in some way. So when we launched, the strategy was better ads, influencer marketing. That worked really well, to be fair. Is underrated. If you're making money and you've got money sitting in the bank, you're not growing fast enough. I always say start with the customer, understand what they want, understand what their pain point is, then hit them with the right piece of content, with the right message, in the right place, at the right time. And that worked beautifully for the brand. So they had about a 10 times growth in e-com. Well, because you realize when you get to that point where you thought you wanted to be, where you thought that was going to be it, you get there and it doesn't actually feel like you thought it would. I say there's like a fine balance between sort of that like blind ambition and courage and then like arrogance at the same time. Like you have to know that you don't know things. We had no idea what we were doing, like genuinely. Honestly, like we when I say we'd never started a business before, like done anything like this before.
How many units did you have to prepare for the initial goals?
Over 100,000. Yeah.
All right, guys, welcome back to another episode. I know you're going to love this one. Another awesome e-com episode for you guys. We had Rachael Wilde in the house. She's the co-founder of TBH Skincare and York Street Brands. They've had some seriously explosive growth in terms of e-com and retail. She's done over 10 million with TBH, and the York Street Brands group did over 22 million in revenue from 2 brands last year. So some seriously impressive stuff, and she dropped so much value about the whole journey and a big focus, obviously, on marketing and content as well as retail growth. So we'll get into the episode in a second. Before we do, can I please ask for a few favors? If you're watching on YouTube, could you like this video and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already? The more of you that do that, as you can see, guys, consistently, we get bigger and better guests who can come and deliver more value. And if you're listening on Apple Podcast or Spotify, I'd really appreciate it if you could leave me a 5-star review. It helps us grow the podcast. And that's it, guys. Let's get into it. All right, we're back with another episode. I know everyone's going to love these. Another massive e-com one for everyone. So Rachael Wilde, you guys have probably seen her online because I know there's a big e-com crew. If you haven't seen her, you've definitely seen her brand. So she's the co-founder of TBH Skincare and York Street Brands, which is like a really cool merger I want to talk to you about between TBH Skincare and BoostLab. Now, Rachael started the business at 23 years old. She made the Forbes 30 under 30 list.
I'm not 40 yet.
I know. I realized I misspoke there. So just for a little bit of context, I don't want to reveal everything we'll talk about, but so did 650K in the first year, which is still super impressive. Now in the fourth year, did over $10 million in revenue. So some really like explosive growth from about 2.5-3 million the year before. So we're going to talk about all that. But not only in e-com have you achieved a lot of success, you're stocked in over 1,200 retailers around the country. So another really impressive e-com story. People always love hearing these. So Rachael, thank you for coming in and giving us your time. I know we're right in the midst of Black Friday. So really grateful for you joining us today.
No, thanks for having me.
You're welcome. So I know everyone's going to love this. We're going to talk through everything, but where I want to start, because it's something a little bit different now, obviously you've grown a business and you've kind of moved through some stages, but I haven't had many conversations with people. So I think it can be a little bit of a cool, like learning experience to, kind of hear how this merger happened. When I was looking into you, the York Street brand sounds really cool as well. And you guys are on York Street. So talk to me about how that happened. I think it's a really interesting story when I heard about kind of just serendipitously this came about off the back of you guys maybe looking at investment and things like that.
Yeah.
But it sounds like somehow you've found the perfect partnership and both brands have got a lot out of the merger. I'd love to kind of hear your experience with that process and take us on that journey if you could.
Yeah, of course. The merger did come about serendipitously, and it came about because we were raising capital. So TBH Skincare hadn't taken on any sort of like sophisticated or institutional investment up until this stage. So when we started, we bootstrapped, we raised with family and friends. We also took out loans with the bank. We, after about 18 months of being in the business, did an equity crowdfund of about 460,000.
It's pretty good to raise that much money from a crowdfund as well.
Yeah, it was hard work, hard work. And then fast forward about another 12 months, we really wanted to bring on board investment in a larger scale that would let us take on retail, set ourselves up for, something like a Priceline, which is pretty large.
Yeah.
And then we also really wanted advisory sort of capabilities in the business that could help us steer it and from people who had done it before or who had the right networks. And yes, a brain that we could leverage to grow the business alongside the money. So it wasn't just about the money. It was about that knowledge as well that we would gain access to from the right investor. So we started talking to a bunch of private equity, angel investors. It was a really rough period actually in the capital market. I remember it was tough. I would have had like hundreds of calls with investors. And one of the private equity companies we spoke to said, they looked at the business and they said, like, we love the data because we were pure play ecom. We obviously had so much insight into our customers, our products, like how they sold, frequency, churn, like all of these things. And they looked at it and they looked at what we'd achieved on the investment that we'd had and gone like, whoa, that's impressive. And they really loved the capabilities we had in the founding team. So me being on the brand marketing e-com side, and then my co-founder, who's also my mum.
So cool, by the way.
Well, it works now, but it was like really complicated, obviously, going into business with your mum in the early days. With a family member, I think it's always tough because you've got the personal relationship and then you suddenly have this professional one.
Yeah.
You have to manage as well. But these days it like works like a dream. It just took us a while to get there. But so we were a great team and we had very different skill sets and they really loved that. So she was an incredible finance brain. And then, like I said, myself on the brand and marketing side. And they said, you need to talk to a company called BoostLab because they had already invested in BoostLab. So BoostLab was already in their portfolio. They knew the ins and outs of BoostLab's business and they knew the founders of that business. And they said, you guys are really complementary. So we ended up meeting with Craig, who co-founded BoostLab, and we had a meeting with him and he, again, looked at our numbers and how the business had sort of tracked and was like, this is great. You guys are literally just missing cash.
Yeah.
He's a really seasoned businessman. He has, he's got, he's got great instincts when it comes to business. He knows how to raise capital. He's really good at the investor management side of things. He can steer the ship. He's done international export before. Like he had really strong relationships with the retailers. So we sort of joined forces and we were already in conversations with Priceline then. But joining forces like at that specific time of TBH's journey was actually perfect because we'd built all of the foundations and he was right. We were just missing like cash and we were missing infrastructure. And I think we were also missing a little bit of someone like pushing us to go harder. Yeah. And that was him because he's like, go, run and sort of gave us that push. And on their side, they had, all of that great like business foundation. Their products were amazing. They very savvy in terms of how they source, formulate, like the manufacturing sides, like solid, all of that stuff. And they just were missing a little piece on the brand positioning side. Yeah. And so that me being able to come in and actually have some fun with taking on another brand and getting to sort of play with that. I did a whole bunch of focus groups, like to find out who their customer was, what their opportunities were, and then ended up repositioning them to an over 50s demographic.
Oh, wow. Interesting.
Yeah. And Craig was very trusting when I was deciding to do that.
Big call, right?
Yeah. And that worked beautifully for the brand. So they had about a 10 times growth in e-com.
That's crazy, right? And this is why I wanted to start with that because, obviously I do a lot of research before we do these podcasts. So I know like, 7-8Xs across the board for both businesses and like completely complementary. So you like 10X their e-com and they helped you scale your retail almost the same amount.
Yep, exactly right. That's exactly what happened.
It's like, how can people take away a lesson from this? Like, is there anything that you took away from this in terms of like, okay, when you're looking to start a new business, whether it be with a co-founder or with investors, like, because I think sometimes people, it can be the instincts of us, e-com crew. Oh, I'm very creative and I'm a very hard worker and I'm like this. Let me go find my best friend who's also the same and we'll get into business together.
Oh, yeah, classic.
Often like having the like complementary skill sets, particularly, us e-com crew, we're very like social media marketing, but all this other like, any sort of like corporate structures or processes for raising funds or dealing with these big like international or like, large companies with like thousands and thousands of staff. We have no experience with that. Yep. So I'm sure you would have learned a lot from that journey, but like, is there anything that, do you think you can take away that? I'm saying this in a lot of words. Anything about that in terms of advice for someone looking to get in business with someone else in terms of who do they pick to partner with? Because I get that a lot. People saying, and like what you've done, should I partner with my brother or my sister or my best friend?
Yeah.
And sometimes working with family or friends can work, but in other times, if you want to, make the right decision from a business sense rather than just a personal sense, I think doing something like what you've done is probably, the ideal way to set that up.
I think you need same values, same philosophy around business, but then different skill sets. So, Bridget, who's my mum, has a completely different skill set to me. That's why we made such a good team because we had no overlap. Like you have two different brains working well in their specific areas. It's only when you start to try and cross over into each other's areas that it probably doesn't work because I'm never going to understand necessarily how her brain works completely. And she's also never going to fully understand mine because we're different sort of brains. And then Craig's another brain as well. And there was other people as well on their management side who were, again, different. So Raj was, he's our CCO and he was in the BoostLab business. So another senior that sort of came in and he thinks differently as well. And everyone's got different backgrounds. And, I think that variety of thinking in the room, that's when you come up with the best idea because you've got everyone thinking from a different perspective.
Yeah.
So I think that's really important. Like don't hire, I even say like, but when I hire for my blind spots, like don't hire a replica, don't hire like cookie cutter replicas of each other, and it can be very appealing to do that because you can hire yes men essentially around you who like will be like, yes, let's do that. And that might feel really good to you as the leader to surround yourself with people who just think the same. But for the business, it's actually very, very detrimental.
I would agree. I think in the really early stages in terms of like proper startup mode, you're hiring your first few people and everyone kind of needs to be an all-rounder. That's the time I think you can get like, just give me the energy, just give me someone that wants to work hard and is okay, figuring shit out and breaking things.
You need a generalist.
You need a generalist. Sure. But as you start to grow and like obviously you already achieved like, quite a substantial growth in terms of the business, but you need to go to the next level. Yeah. That's when these things really come into play. But I'd love to know how you approached like really taking these guys and growing them in e-com when you're positioning them as an over 50s brand. A lot of people would think that's kind of like counterintuitive, but how did you execute that? That's really interesting.
So I always say start with the customer, like understand the customer, understand what they want, understand what their pain point is, then hit them with the right piece of content, with the right message in the right place at the right time. Like all of these things, if you hit every single point like that, like that's what makes it work. But in terms of executing that, like I had the focus group, so I had all those insights. Like I knew that they weren't being spoken to specifically. I knew what would convince them to buy a product. I knew sort of the basics for what they were looking for. They didn't want to know what the ingredients were. They didn't care. They wanted to know how much is it? When do I use it? Because I don't know when to use the product. That was like a huge thing was just tell me when to use it and what it does and then I'll buy it. Don't need to know ingredients, don't need to know all this other stuff. And so it was about understanding what was important to the customer, then pairing that with content that worked, so it spoke to all of that from someone that looked like them as well. So it was like they needed to be able to see themselves in the content. They needed to hear all those messages and then they need it delivered in the right platform, which is Facebook and Instagram for this demographic.
Yeah.
Like, yes, it might seem counterintuitive, but they are so engaged. I would say a lot more engaged on Facebook.
If I ever message my mum anything, no matter the time of day, she's responded in like less than 5 minutes.
Yeah, they are on Facebook.
They're on it, yeah.
And like so engaged.
Yeah.
So, and also you don't have many brands sort of like marketing to them. So
properly, right?
When you look at like how difficult it is to cut through to a, Gen Z millennial audience, like nowhere near as hard with that audience. So it was like dynamite for the business.
That's actually really interesting because obviously you've gone into a space where you're going up against billion-dollar skincare industry. So it's you've got to really find your USP. And I think you kind of have one in the technology inside your cream, which again, people are like, what do you mean technology inside a cream? Oh, yeah. Really cool story, which we'll get into in a second. But like when you started the business, obviously you would have built a lot of like your skill set and knowledge about business since you've launched, but did you strategically plan, hey, this is going to be the way we're going to go uniquely into the market? Are we going to just lean into what does it stand for again? TBH? The
biofilm hack.
The biofilm hack, which is really cool. What was your go-to-market kind of differentiator point going into a place where, hey, it's arguably, along with fashion, one of the most saturated markets that you could go into?
Yeah, skincare's so saturated.
Pretty tough, yeah.
I think number one, if you're going into a saturated category, you need to find the niche that's underserviced in some way or some part of that category that's not being spoken to in the way that they could be. So for BoostLab, that was the over 50s customer. In skincare, like that was the niche that was not being spoken to, that was underserviced. So yes, you've got a lot of products, but actually within that specific area, there's not.
Yeah.
TBH, we were going into an acne category. Now, acne is very saturated, but there was an approach that we wanted to take that wasn't really being done by anyone else at the time, which was get rid of the clinical stuff, pull away from the white packaging and the boring sort of scientific talk.
And the Clearasil back in the day, all that sort of stuff didn't work at all.
And all of the healthcare professional sort of led brands.
White lab coats.
White lab coats, which to be fair was quite controversial when we had such a scientific product. A lot of people really questioned why we were pulling away from that.
It's true, yeah.
But it came back to the customer and how the customer wanted to be interacted with. So at the time there was brands like Go-To Skincare that were booming, that were delivering a new type of customer experience where this like they were building brand fandom. That's what I call it. And that's what we wanted to build. But within acne was how do we actually take a product in an acne category and then make it like trending and cool and like fun to use. And so that became like the core mission and mantra was like, we want to destigmatize the problem. We want to create like this really shame-free space, but we want to just make it fun and cool. So get rid of the white packaging, you know, like build in this really unique tone of voice. And no one was doing that at the time. So that made us stand out within all of the other noise.
And I read in doing my research on you, what is it like 80 or 85% of the world experience acne at some point in their lives?
Yeah, 85, yeah.
And there's still that like, you know, I think we've come a long way in the last couple of years. Like you've said, there's been some maybe trendsetters like you that are at the forefront pushing that. Like we've had with mental health. But yeah, back in the day when we were in high school, it was not cool in any way. Now you got like the colourful pimple patches and stuff. And it's like
a fashion statement.
But let's go back into the earlier stages to catch up. I just really wanted to start at that point because I found it so interesting. And I know we've never had a conversation like that on the podcast. We talk to people all the time in ecom. But that was something quite unique. And I thought the way that you guys complemented each other, there's a real big lesson in that for people listening. Yeah. But take me back, you know, I ask this question a lot of the time, like what was a moment from your childhood that impacted you? Obviously for you, it seems like your acne journey massively impacted you because it's what led you to start the business. But what was the first moment that turned into the idea that ended up being TBH Skincare? Just a quick one from me. If you've been listening to the podcast for a while, you'd know that after scaling Happy Skin Co. to over $10 million per year, I spent close to 18 months creating the Viral Brand Builder program, which teaches someone with zero experience how to launch and scale their very own e-commerce brand. With over 100 training videos and direct access to me, including one-on-one calls, you'll be guided throughout the entire process. Now, we already have a bunch of incredible results from students that are making multiple 5 and 6 figures per month. So if you want to learn how to build a business that has the potential to completely change your life, then click the link in the description and book in an application call today. Spots are limited as you'll be speaking directly to me. So hopefully I'll chat to some of you soon. But until then, let's get back to the podcast.
Well, it happened quite quickly, to be fair. I never thought of myself as someone starting a business. Like I think these days you see a lot of young people coming through and being like, I want to work for myself, or like I want to, you know, find a solution to a problem and then create a business. And I think that's amazing. But in my day, I sound so old saying in my day, I'm only 28, but back in my day, when I was going through uni, that wasn't like so much of a thing. So I studied marketing at uni. I always dreamt of like, you know, creating big like ad campaigns. I was like, I want to create a Super Bowl commercial like one day, you know, those were the things that I was obsessed with.
So you came from like the proper, like as a marketing.
Yeah. Oh, I loved marketing, like traditional marketing as well, like brand marketing.
Yeah.
All the psychology behind like, colors and this, that, and the other, like not so much ecom. Yeah. I love ecom though. And love all the data behind it now. But yeah, I just loved marketing. So I came out of uni, found myself getting a job in medical devices, which was so random. But it
very restrictive marketing in medical devices.
Oh my God, yes, so regulated. Yeah. But very commercial environment. I was the first hire in social media in that company. So I liked it because I was like, this is a challenge. Like it's highly regulated. It's a role that never existed before. How on earth does social media play into like the sales of medical devices? So I appreciated the challenge, I think. Went in there, learnt a lot. And then that team, when I went in, was a team of 3. By the time I left, it was a team of 30.
Whoa.
So I spent 3 years at that company and progressed quite quickly through that team and learnt a lot commercially, just from like a business savvy point of view. And then through being in that industry, came across this technology. So the technology that's now in our hero product, it was being used in a hospital setting for things like wound care and infection control and treatment. So the technology itself can treat bacteria that lives within like a very hard to reach colony called a biofilm. And so bacteria within biofilm, very hard to treat. It's a novel thing to be able to do that. And that's what this medical research and development company discovered they could do in the US. They patented it.
Yep.
It's very technical. But they then discovered that the same tech had an application in acne. It could treat acne. And then they just discovered that clinically, proved it with against like the market leading players. So benzoyl peroxide, salicylic acid. And they were just sitting on this product.
I remember using like that Benzac and like, it's like, it just turns your skin like white
proactive.
and flake, proactive. It's so bad. I wish I didn't do it. went on Roaccutane.
That's a hectic drug, but you know what? Quite effective for a lot of people.
Oh, it is. It worked. I was probably in like year 11. But then like you go like all the flakiness, which for mine wasn't as bad because my acne was more like on like the sides of my neck.
Yeah,
so it wasn't like full on my face. But then I found like a lot of people do. I didn't get it while I was on it, but you hear the stories of like really bad like depression and mental health things. And like that was after
huge
that period was
effects.
the first time I ever felt like I even had to like, when you're a kid, you take for granted your mental health. You don't really think of it. You just live.
So true.
You know what I mean?
You
That
just
was
wake up in
after
the morning
taking
and
that
everything's
was the
fine.
first time. I was like, why do I feel like this today?
Yeah.
So really gnarly stuff. It does work, but if I had to go through it again, I wouldn't
Yeah,
take
interesting.
it. Yeah.
I think people go on that though because they're so desperate. And that shows you how much acne impacts people because they're willing to actually risk that, potentially risk their mental health because they're just in that place where they're so desperate to fix it.
Well, I knew this girl through a friend down in Melbourne and she was exactly that story. I hadn't even spoken to her for years, but she was posting it on her Instagram stories.
Yeah.
She was very public with her acne and talking about it. And then she went on Roaccutane and then she told people like it started working and she was so happy on her stories and telling people it worked. And then it was maybe like 3 or 4 months later and she's like, came on her stories to speak about it. Like I felt obliged to do this because I spoke publicly about it. So I've taken it and yes, it did clear out my skin, but my mental health has never been so bad. As much as I, wanted to get rid of the acne, like if I could take it back, I never would have done it. So it's a risk to put heavy sort of like medication in your body. If you can find something topical like this and achieve, even close to the same results, I think it's a much better option.
Yeah. And obviously there's different scales of acne. And I think these days I've seen a lot of people jump on Roaccutane quite quickly. And I think Roaccutane's incredible for really severe cases.
Yeah. Yeah.
But you want to be sure like you've tried.
Did you try like any, because I took the antibiotic ones as well when I was in high school. Didn't really do anything for me. Yeah. That's exactly the one.
Minimicin, contraceptive pill for me.
That helps a lot of women, eh?
Yeah, a lot of women in my generation went through that, but it actually made my skin worse.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So, and then I got jumped around onto plenty of different pills, which talk about messing with your mental health and a whole bunch of other things. I can only imagine. Yeah. So that was not a pleasant experience, but I actually ended up staying on a pill for 7 years and then they actually just gave me back my antibiotic because it didn't fix anything. They put me on the pill to get me off the antibiotic and then it made things worse. So they handed me back the antibiotic but then kept me on the pill and I stayed on the pill and the antibiotic for 7 years.
Wow.
Which is terrible for you. Like as in to be on an antibiotic for that long is not good.
Did it take you like your system a little bit of time to reset afterwards before it normalized?
Yeah, I reckon like 2 years.
See.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's heavy. See, like the Roaccutane like affected me for years after I stopped. My brother as well. Like he was on it and affected him. Yeah. But this biofilm hack, really, really cool. So it's like, again, if you weren't in this random job that you randomly went into. Yeah, if I wasn't in that
random job, I never would have come across that technology. Sorry, yes, that was the question. Yeah. So when did I decide to do the business? So when I came across that tech, having been that customer who'd been through that whole experience with acne, I was like, this is a huge product. If you bring that to the market in the right way, like there are so many people that are so desperate to find this solution. If it actually works, then like you've got an incredible business. I came more from like the brand building side of it, where I was really excited by what you could do in the space. And then so we went in, myself and my mum, who I dragged into all of this, saying, do you think it could be so cool if we did this?
Yeah.
She did all the startup modeling and startup costing. And then I went away and sort of thought about what would be the brand name, how would we sell it, what customers would we target? And then we went and pitched that to the CEO of this company.
I heard that. Were they looking for someone to do this, or you just pitched the idea to them and they're like, makes sense?
No. So they only ever work off a like distribution model typically.
Okay.
And I think because it was skincare and beauty, it wasn't necessarily something where they would ever go like direct to sell, because that wasn't in their wheelhouse.
To do something like that.
Yeah. So they would have been looking for a partner. I don't know how actively. But yeah, I think right place, right time. And you just grab the opportunity with both hands, go and pitch for it. And I think they were sort of, I think they liked our enthusiasm for what we thought we could do with it. And for them, it was a very small part of their portfolio.
Yeah. So what was it like? You're pitching for like an initial exclusive period for like 6 months, a year, 2 years to like sort of prove what you could do. Obviously they'd be very happy now, but there was no guarantees back then that you'd end up being an 8-figure brand.
No, but when you do go into those agreements, you're often going into the agreements based off minimums.
Yeah. Okay.
So if you don't reach the minimums, then they have the ability to pull that contract back off you.
Yeah.
So we were also just backing ourselves at the end of the day when we got into that deal.
So next steps to make this, wild dream of yours a reality. I imagine for starting something like that, it's not your typical private label thing or even just your standard product. There's a lot of development costs. I imagine quite high MOQs.
Yep.
How did you get the money together to launch something like this your first business? I'm not sure if your mother had done businesses in the past. What was that like? And when did you guys be like, you look at each other like, we're going to actually do this thing?
Oh, well, when we came out of the meeting and they were like, yeah, you can have it. We were like, oh, okay. So now we actually have to like go and raise the money and figure it out. So we both tipped in our own savings, and then we went to family and friends and raised, I think we probably brought in about maybe like between 7 and 10 parties, but it would have equated to about 250,000 total. And then we went to the bank and got a loan from day one.
So you really like bet on yourselves properly.
Yeah, $120,000 that was like we were personally guaranteeing, which for me, I was like, well, I've got no assets.
Nothing,
so what are you going to come and take?
Like it's nothing. Really the house, I imagine. Right?
Sure. I'm renting. I have nothing to my name. I'm 23. Like that's it.
At 23 as well. Pretty crazy.
Yeah. I don't think we didn't ever stop to ponder like, what if it didn't work? I mean, I don't think you can do that. I don't think you can do that in the early days. Like,
but you don't. When you don't know, you don't know. You just think it's going to be so easy, right?
Yeah, naivety is a good thing, as everyone says. But I say there's like a fine balance between sort of that like blind ambition and courage, and then like arrogance at the same time. Like you have to know that you don't know things, if that makes sense. You just have to back yourself to learn along the way and to like figure it out. But you can't go in thinking you know everything, if that makes sense.
I also just think there's a perception where I agree, and I say this all the time as well, you need that sort of like naivety to not know how hard it is. But also sometimes I see people go too far the other side and just think it's going to be so easy. And then like first roadblock or speed hump that comes up, they're like, too hard, I'm running back.
Yeah, correct.
Yeah. So what was one, do you remember anything pre-launches like? Because I remember if I think back to when we started like Happy Skin Co, like there was a couple times before launch that we're like, fuck, we're not even going to be able to launch. Yeah. Was there anything that happened for you that you stood out was like a big problem you had to resolve before you could get to launch?
Well, honestly, like we when I say we'd never started a business before, like my mum was in the like legal services industry. I was in medical devices in like my first corporate job. We had never like done anything like this before. So I remember even when we were ordering the stock, for example, like that manufacturing process, learning like what was involved in that, and even trying to source packaging like for the first time. Like we had no one helping us. We were just literally figuring it out on the fly.
Did you have like anyone to lean on for advice or anyone?
Like I don't even know how we figured it out. Like we just would ask around, I suppose, or like inquire with certain people, figure the information out along the way. But when we've got our first delivery, I remember we got like these promotional water bottles as like a gift with purchase when we were launching. And they were the first piece of product to arrive. This was before our shipper boxes, before the actual filled products, everything else. And we were planning on storing it at her house. And they arrived on the door, like on the driveway, just the water bottles. And we were like, we're not going to fit all this stuff like in the house.
Yeah.
So then we got a storage unit like nearby. And then we realized, so then she sent me down one morning. She said, actually, we've got all the shipper boxes arriving today. We've already got the water bottles in this storage unit. Just go get the like shipper boxes. So I get a call from the storage place saying, your delivery's arrived. Do you need a forklift? And I was like, I don't know. And they were like, well, is it on pallets? And I was like, I said to them on the phone, what's a pallet?
Yeah, okay.
I didn't even know what a pallet
Proper
was.
green,
like
yeah.
so green. And to think back now, like imagine being that person talking to me on the phone being like, this chick doesn't even know
what's a pallet?
Like, what's a pallet? And they were like, you need a forklift to get this off the truck. And then our storage unit was on a second floor and they were like, this is too heavy to even sit on the second floor. You need a ground floor like storage unit. We had no idea what we were doing, like genuinely.
But I feel like that's what makes it all so fun now to look back on. Because you launched 2020. 2020. Was like TikTok a thing by then?
Not really.
Not really?
Like,
Because did you film all this? Because we filmed quite a bit.
No,
but like
I didn't
we
film
weren't
anything.
into like documenting the journey like right now where people film everything.
Oh yeah, no, I wish I had filmed
How sad
more.
is that, right?
I know. I wish I could go. Well,
How good what did the content do as well?
I feel like any content I watched from back then, I just cringe so hard though. So I'm also like, I don't know if I want to see it.
Yeah. No, that's really cool. Now you had that product launch. I hear you did like 4,000 on your first day, which is pretty impressive, more than we did on our first day. What did you do to get $4,000 on launch day?
Well, I did have some very supportive, obviously, friends and family. But I had documented part of the experience of building the brand on Instagram.
Okay, so you did do that. Cool, nice.
But it wasn't like it wasn't really day to day. Like I think I missed those opportunities to show when things were going really wrong. I think these days I lean more into that. But back then it was more just like, oh, how great is this? We got this like in, like you weren't really being like, oh, we're really fucking everything up here.
I wish you could have recorded like that phone call and a video on you like, wait, what's a pallet?
What
and
is
then
a
it's like you need a thing and like that would have been the best content.
Yeah. So it was just organic. Like it was organic Instagram. We had a wait list sort of there and I think we had about like 1,000 followers by the time we launched.
I want to ask you one other thing before we like talk about like the scaling process, which obviously everyone is going to be super keen to hear about. But the initial branding for TBH Skincare, talk to me about the process for that. Was it the same sort of branding you have now? Have you kept that? Yeah. And to get proper branding done when you're a startup, it's not 1,000, 2,000, it's 5, 10, 15, 20, depending on the agency you go with. How did you approach that? Because I'm assuming that you guys would have invested a decent amount of cash into that at the start. And do you feel like it was worth every cent? Or could you have tried to do it yourselves and go a little bit more budget and save money?
I think there's a scale, I guess, of how much you could build your brand with an agency like from day dot. So if I was building with an agency now, we'd be doing like tone of voice, visual identity, like all of these things within like a brand guideline.
Yeah.
For us, when I look back at what that was, it was visual identity. That's what we took out of house because I wasn't a designer. But from a marketing point of view, I did the competitor mapping, the positioning, the tone of voice, and the name and all of that. Like agencies can do all of that essentially. Sometimes if you just go to them with an idea, if you're not a marketer, they'll do the competitor mapping, they'll do the tone of voice, they'll do the naming and all of that. So all of that was coming from us. So all we took was that to an agency and said basically give it a visual representation. Yeah. And so they said, okay, here's the logo. Like here's 2 options. Here's the colorway. This is why we did it. You've told us it's friendly, approachable, all these things. And this is the visual that we've pulled together off the back of that. And then they did the first 3 product packaging mock-ups. So that also gave us like a clear visual identity for how that was applied to packaging.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so it wasn't huge. It was like $5,000.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Because where I'm going with this is, you know, we live in a day where AI is super handy.
Yeah,
Canva,
true.
you can do anything. Shopify is getting it easier and easier to kind of like drag and drop and create sections yourself. So you need to rely on others less and less. And some people are starting it and they don't have $250,000 as a full budget. Like they're like $5,000, $10,000.
Yeah.
So I know you don't need it from the start, like a fully professional, like kitted out, like visual identity. But I know it does really help a lot as well because, you know, every second person wants to start a business these days. So you're up against more and more people. To stand out, a really strong visual identity can be a really good way to do that. But where's your thoughts on how much budget you think? I know I'm putting you on the spot and like completely unprepared question. Would you put towards visual identity at the start if you had a limited budget, do you think?
I think it is really important. I don't think you want to be going and changing it later. It's something that it's like equity in the like in your business. So you're building a brand and every time you put that piece of packaging in front of someone, you're building like brand recognition and recall. If you then go and change that down the line, all of that work you've done up until that day, you've then got to do again. And so I often say invest up front because it'll cost you less later.
Yeah.
Like it's expensive up front but less costly in the long run. If you go cheap early, it's like when you build a website and you go cheap early, it costs you always later. So I think there's an element of that, but it's within reason. So, you know, if you've got limited budget, I wouldn't be throwing like 20K, getting like a full, you know, tone of voice work done and competitor mapping. Like you should do it yourself, I would say. Yeah.
At what point do you quit your job? Did you quit when you launched? Did you wait 6 months to have a little bit of like consistent sales come in?
I quit the minute we found out we got that license.
Sick.
So 6 months before we launched.
Yeah. So you're really going all in on this.
Yeah.
So when did it feel real? Like you walk out, you realize you did this. Was it that day? Was it launch day? Was it your first sale, first million? Like when do you and your mum look at each other or even just the internal feeling for yourself and like, holy crap, we got a real business?
I don't even know when that happened. I mean, there were definitely points along the way where we were like, what? Like, that's crazy. But I think I do that more these days. Like I've learnt to reflect more often because otherwise you miss those moments. There's always something else that you're going to be aiming for. So if you don't stop and appreciate like what you've got now and how far you've come, then you just actually like don't get the joy at all. And I didn't get a lot of joy necessarily like in those days because it was like there was always something else that I was trying to go for. There was definitely an element though when we walked out of that meeting and we were like, we just got licensed to this like to this tech and it's incredible. Like, wow. I think I even have, you just reminded me, I have a bottle of wine in my house that says agreement signed and the date of which we signed it. And we put it on a bottle of wine. We were like, we'll open that one day.
Yeah.
God, that's weird to think about. So yeah, there was like elements along the way. These days I walk into the office and most days I look around and I'm like, who are all these people?
Yeah. Because how many are you up to now? You got like 20 something in your office? 28.
Yeah. And I'm like, and 16 people are in marketing. And I'm like, where did all these people come from?
I think it's good that you're doing that now because you're still like pretty early on. Like you've achieved a lot of success, but you're still pretty early on because I think one of the worst parts of like entrepreneurship or like being an ambitious person is that you're always thinking about what's the next.
Yeah.
And it's like you can say, yes, I'm grateful for where I am. But really that lack of gratitude for where you are or appreciation, the main person it affects is ourselves.
100%.
So it's like you put so much on the line, you do so much. And it's the same. We were having this conversation last night. We're just, when is it going to be enough to just like, just chill? And like, you just get it all done and you don't have to worry about all these things. Yeah. You don't always want more.
Because you realize when you get to that point where you thought you wanted to be, where you thought that was going to be it, you get there and it doesn't actually feel like you thought it would. And like, I've had so many moments where it's like, okay, you got the verbal confirmation in the room from Priceline that you're going to be stocked, but don't count, all your eggs before they hatch. Yeah. So don't celebrate then when you've got the verbal confirmation because you never know what might happen. Then you end up in store, but it's like, might not sell, might get delisted. Yeah. Don't celebrate then either. Like all of these things along the way where you go like, oh, one day we're going to be in Priceline and that's going to feel amazing. And then you get there and you're like, why am I sadder than ever? But like, you know what I mean? Like it's just, you have to learn to celebrate along the way. So now I do that. If I get like a retailer meeting that I'm so excited about, I'm like, I got the retailer meeting.
Yeah.
That's like the hardest part, like I'm going to celebrate that even if it doesn't come off.
That dynamic, is it any different? And it's your only experience, so you can't really compare it. But do you feel like I'm sure you talk to a lot of other people that have started businesses, that appreciation and that celebratory sort of journey you go on, is that any different in the fact that you're doing it with your mum?
Yeah, I think now like we look at each other and definitely go like we have experienced all these things together that not a lot of people will understand at the end of the day. Like it's a pretty unique experience to be in such a pressure cooker environment where these days the growth that we're experiencing is next level. Like all the challenges become so different. It's like inventory and cash and this, that, and the other. Like you're just trying to keep up with growth.
Yeah.
But that type of experience doesn't come around very often. And like to be doing that together and having that experience, like I don't think anyone will understand, how that's played out and all the different pieces that have gone into that.
Yeah. Like you're the first person that I've spoken to that have done a business with one of their parents.
Yeah, okay.
And like mainly the people I'm having on the podcast are sort of our age, like late 20s, early 30s. Some exceptions, but yeah, most people it's like, oh, with my partner or my brother or my best friend. So I think it's like, I'm sure there would have been challenges, like you kind of alluded to at the start, like there always is working with family, but the fact that you get to do it with your mum, and then if one day, I don't know what your plans, I'm not pretending to know, what your plans are, but if say 10 years down the line, you sell and it's like, cheers, mum, go buy your house and all this stuff.
100%.
What a crazy life experience to get to do, right?
Yeah.
To build that with your mum. Like it's so cool. It's
I think
so
we've got appreciation for that now. Yeah.
But let's talk about some of that like crazy growth that you're going through. As I mentioned before, around 650K you did in the first year, still an amazing first year up until, last year, over 10 million in revenue. What did the strategy look like to hit that first 650K in terms of like, the channels or what your focuses are versus how much that has changed doing, 8 figures in the previous 12 months?
Yeah. So when we launched, the strategy was meta ads, influence marketing, media.
Yep.
That worked really well, to be fair. Media is underrated in my
opinion. For conversion as well, you think, or just like brand equity?
Yeah. Media is part of, I look at everything in combination. So it's never like one thing on one channel. They all feed into each other. And I think media is also a really good sense check on like how if media can talk about you and your story and your business, then you've got something newsworthy. If media don't have appetite to talk about your brand, I actually think that's a good health check for like, are you doing something different? And
that's a good point.
And worth talking about. So yeah, I just love media, like as a side note. But then media, we got these really incredible articles that we could then use as content, which was major social proof in our ads. And so it's all connected, even the influencer side of things, like that gave us a platform for content that we could create off the back of maybe something that had happened with an influencer that could then go into organic, that then went into ads, or that then sparked a media headline that we then repurposed into ads and stuff. So I think back then it was always like we were ready to spend some money. We found the right ambassadors. We partnered with them. We weren't shy about that. We paid the rates. We took the leap of faith in doing that. But I think we made smart decisions around who we partnered with at the time. And then once that partnership happened, you didn't just let it die. Like, I'm a big believer in like squeeze as much juice as you can basically out of whatever piece of content you get and send it in 100 different directions, And so you can repurpose it on your organic, you can then take that into ads, media, whatever it is. It was like all of those things working in combination that took us to 650.
And you mentioned influencers. Again, it's obviously the media landscape for social has completely changed over the last 4 years.
So different.
The role of influencers back then, they drove a lot more conversion than they do today. And that's just what everyone's saying. It's not like this new thing that's going to shock anyone. But for a brand like you guys, because so for Happy Skin Co, we're a once-off purchase, you don't really need to buy the new model. You can, and probably 5% of our customers return, probably more so for gifts, but it's like really it's a product that you can keep for 5-10 years. Whereas with you guys, it's a consumable product. People need to restock, whether it be once a month, bi-monthly or once a quarter.
Yeah.
Does that work for you going back to the well, so to speak, of like the best creators who are like really proper brand ambassadors rather than just the odd, hey, post this, smile and see you later?
Yeah, I think when you look at skincare, I think it's more down to the category. Like skincare, you need big buy-in. People don't just, for example, so I'll compare it to fashion. If you have an item of clothing, as an influencer, you just need to wear it. If someone likes how it looks, they buy it. It's not hugely complicated. Whereas in skincare, maybe it's like, oh, well, what does the fabric feel like and how high quality is it? Maybe you need to know those things. But with skincare,
Even that's like secondary, right?
it's secondary, yeah. Like you probably still buy it if you saw it, it looked good, and you like had somewhere you needed to wear it, or like it's a very quick path to conversion. Skincare's a lot more considered. There's a lot more you need to tackle. In a short period of time where no one's got any attention spans anymore. Like there's a lot that you need to cover. So I think the talent side of things with who you partner with on an influencer side, you can build a lot of credentials that builds trust. But at the same time, if you get it wrong, you can actually you can eat away at the trust. So it's got to be the right partnership. Like for us, that person had to use the product, had to see a result. And the result was so obvious and they were so transparent. They had such a high level of trust that their audience knew they wouldn't recommend a product they didn't actually genuinely use.
Yeah.
And so that was really important for the category in skincare, I believe, to actually then get cut through.
And in terms of finding a creator, obviously we got to tick those boxes. They use it, it worked and they love it. But in terms of a creator, if you see a new one that you haven't worked with yet,
yeah,
what is it about them that's I think they'll do good?
Engagement so I'm a big fan of smaller influencers with higher engagement. I often find they convert better. Again, they've got
agreed.
a high level of trust a lot of the time. So engagement levels, also, are they the customer? Do they look like the customer? Do they act like the customer? Is the customer following them? All of those things, do they have that audience? And then are they engaged? And are they going to be able to talk to the problem that we're solving for the customer?
Mm-hmm.
Probably the things that I would look at, yeah.
And as you've grown, obviously I had a look at a bunch of your content today. The founder style content is doing really well across the board for a lot of brands.
Yeah.
But when did you consciously start, leaning into that? Because some founders are like, oh, I don't want to do it. I don't want to put my face out there. But when did that start becoming a core strategy for you? And how much do you think that impacted the genuine sales and growth of the business?
I think we started dabbling with it come the end of 2021, I would say, or maybe it was a bit later, 2022, because we saw it working here and there. I'd hired in a part-time marketing coordinator, so I had a second person to film content with, which I think made it a lot easier because there was someone else in the room going we should film this, and they were the one actually holding the camera and we were working on it together. So having someone to soundboard ideas off and create content in partnership with made it a lot easier as a founder, I think, to then create that content and almost have the confidence to in a way. It sounds a bit weird, but for me, that was my experience. And then one day I literally just got in the car and reacted to a radio mention that we had from Abby Chatfield. I got in the car, filmed this blind react video in my car, very organic.
Was that you sent product to her and
So she was one of our ambassadors we'd worked with, but we hadn't had a contract with her in over a year.
Oh, wow.
And so she just randomly.
So it was a proper
It was a random mention on radio. Yeah. And it got forwarded to us via a Spotify recording of the segment.
Yeah.
And so I sat in my car to listen to it on Spotify and thought, oh, I'm going to film my reaction to hearing this mentioned. That was it, right? And I filmed it, sat in the car, edited it, and then posted it on my personal TikTok, which at the time I wasn't very active on. I had not really posted much business-wise at all on my personal TikTok. And then it just blew up. And that's when I realized the power, because that sold for us. That thing never died. That's actually how a lot of people discovered the brand today. They'll go, oh, I came in through the Abby Chatfield radio mention. I saw that piece of content. So it got over 2 million views and gained us all of these customers. And it actually was the moment the business turned profitable.
Wow.
And so I went, oh, okay, that's where my time's going.
Yeah, lean into those things rather than lean away. And, it is, obviously you're a marketer, but it's different when you're the one speaking and doing all the things yourself, right? But you mentioned like it's the moment. I've just thrown my pen at myself. The moment the brand turned profitable. It's something I had on my notes to speak to you about, because I think sometimes there's a bit of a lack of understanding at times for people going into a product like yours, where it's like not a low AOV, but a lower AOV.
Yep.
But it's just consumable. You're really going to make money off the second, third, fourth sale.
Customer lifetime value is really important.
For a brand like yours, obviously it's great to be profitable off the first sale for every brand, but how much of that was conscious? Like, were you willingly going into it with your eyes open, knowing, hey, we might make $1 profit, we might break even, we might even lose a couple bucks on the first sale, because I know on average customers say for X amount of months. How did you kind of work that out? And did you know that it was going to be like that before you launched the business?
Yeah. So there's a few things I have to say on this in terms of, if you want to grow the business fast, there is no way you're going to do that profitably, like particularly with a product-based business, because you need to be investing in growth. Mm-hmm. So if you're making money and you've got money sitting in the bank, you're not growing fast enough. That's essentially everything that I've learned and seen, is money sitting in your bank account is a different type of business profile than high growth to me.
It's a pretty extreme take.
Yeah.
But I mean, like it, but it's
for a product-based business, because you've got the product stock to invest in, which is a huge amount of cash. You've marketing in a category like skincare is expensive, but then how else are you building brands? So yes, look at the AOV, how much money is your CPA in Meta, for example, for your first purchase. Yes, maybe you can break even or lose money, and then you'll make it back over the customer lifetime value. That's one part. But even if you are making, $1 on that first purchase, I'd be putting that dollar into like brand some sort of more like brand awareness piece or future growth or NPD. Like, are you building new product pipeline? All of these things invest in future state growth that mean you won't be making any money, on that day.
Yeah.
I mean, it's two different takes. Like, you can then grow more conservatively, more slowly, and more safely probably, and negate a bit of risk by going, okay, it's one product for now. We're going to, make sure the money in is the money out and all of this stuff. But when you hit a wall, what happens? Like, you're going to retreat. Like, you have to be ready to essentially dive in to the negative.
How would you describe your risk profile?
I would say I'm like medium to high.
Okay.
High risk, yeah. I would say Craig's like on the higher end, and then my mum would be low risk.
Low risk. I'm
the in between
has
them.
Your risk profile in terms of it being a scale changed since the day you've launched to now?
Massively. It's come backwards.
Yeah, same. Yeah, same.
I'm so much more scared than what I was.
Because we have so much more to lose now.
Yeah, that's what I say.
Yeah, it's interesting. I've spent too much time with my cousin who we hired as our CFO, and he's like risk mitigation. And,
all the finance people have to be.
Of course, right? But I've learned so much, and like it saves you. Like, you really do need to have that understanding.
You do.
But yeah, it's interesting. Like, you tend to get, I need to spend some more time with your business partner, Craig. Like, hey, how do you navigate all that? But yeah, I think it's important as well. Like, there's no right or wrong way to navigate this stuff. But I like, you're someone that a lot of people look up to, and a lot of people really value your take on that. So thank you for sharing. As you guys have grown, obviously you've grown not only in terms of the e-com stuff, but retail. How do you shift the business from a pure play e-com focus to retail? And some e-com brands, for some reasons, we resisted it for a while before we moved into retail. I don't know why. It's just what, e-com brands think you're too cool for retail. That's at the start.
Well, it's the margin game, and no one wants to give away margin.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But what was that process for you guys like? Was it something that you always wanted to do, or was it discussion, hey, are we now retail ready? Should we start that process? Obviously, you can be looking at a 12-month like sales cycle anyway at times.
Yeah.
What did that look like for you guys?
I think the dream was eventually to always be stocked in retail, but when we launched, we were in the middle of COVID. So it was like, we actually had no idea what that was going to look like and when that was going to come sort of back into play. And I think our approach was, we want to be where our customers want us to be, sort of thing. So if our customers are shopping in store at Priceline, for example, then we want to be there to make sure that we make it as easy as possible for them to pick up the product. And I do think that is the right way to think about it, in terms of like, where would be the easiest place for your customer to get your product? And so online can be really easy, you know, if you remove all of the shipping costs and break down all the barriers to purchase. But it also, if they're in Priceline anyway, if they're in a grocery, like, you know, where are they going to be when they're shopping for this product, I think is the question. And so we just focused on that. And that was sort of what led our thinking behind retail. But that process wasn't easy. And honestly, though, it was the best decision that we made. Like understanding that was where our customer would go and also encouraging our customer to go there. Like Priceline, a lot of people said like, why not Mecca? Why not Sephora and stuff? But we wanted it to be accessible and the footprint of Priceline was much bigger and it reached a wider audience beyond just like those sort of Mecca and Sephora customers.
Yeah.
And we knew that our customer was bigger than that.
Yeah.
And so, that's why we went Priceline and it just worked so well.
In that moment, I know you've already kind of said, okay, we got the verbal that we're in, still don't celebrate.
Yeah.
You get the PO. Okay, well, we don't have any cash yet.
Yeah.
But like when does the moment that you guys like, was it when they paid the first like PO? I imagine it was quite large for you guys. Did you have to go get financing to prepare all the stock for them?
Yeah.
What was that process like? Because like you think it's great, but then you go and you're now doing
the stock prep was crazy.
Crazy, right? What was it like? Take us through that.
We were lucky that we had enough stock actually because you don't quite know just how much they're going to order.
Yeah.
And for one of our SKUs, they ordered 3 times the amount that we thought they were going to. So they actually took 3/4 of our stock and we had just gotten a delivery in. And they took 3/4 on the first PO and we were like, oh, we need more packaging, more POs.
Scale back our e-com spend for a little bit then,
we need more stock.
Yeah.
But we also had to then barcode everything. We hadn't barcoded anything.
Did you have to do it by hand?
Yeah, we did it by hand, stickering. We had to put Tampa seals on thing. We did it all by hand. It was dumb to do it in-house. We should have outsourced it. And then we packed these boxes onto the pallets ourselves, following like their instructions for how to pack these pallets, cling wrapped them, everything, like, you know, sent them on the trucks. And we actually ended up sending a whole pallet of one of the products with no barcodes.
Oh,
And
what
they were
happened?
missing their barcodes.
Could you then?
We had to track them down to find out what distribution centre they went to because there's 3 different distribution centres. I think they went to Queensland and then we had to like try and contact the stores. We just ended up sending out barcodes to everyone. It was honestly a nightmare. It was a big learning of like, you know what, just spend the money to get someone else to do it right because it's going to be a way bigger headache for you otherwise. We outsourced our fulfillment pretty quickly after that. We don't pack anything these days. Yeah.
Because now how much of, I imagine retail is like got to be at least half of your business nowadays, if not
70%.
more, right? Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So big changes. And what was the group revenue that you guys did last year? I remember hearing it was like 22 million.
Yeah.
What a great merger, like great for both people.
Yeah.
But yeah, now I know Coles, I think was even bigger, right?
Yeah.
Than Priceline. How did you manage getting, how many units did you have to prepare for the initial Coles?
Over 100,000. Yeah.
100,000. And like, what would you usually prepare like in a week usually at that point?
Oh, that's a good question. Like, I think we were maybe doing like 3,000 orders a month.
Yeah. And now
like
in
on
one
e-com,
day,
but then we had
e-com.
Priceline.
Yep.
Yeah. And then bang, like it was, and that's obviously across all the SKUs. That's not 100,000 of every product.
Each SKU,
it was total. But we had to get on board a second manufacturer to deal with that volume. Yeah.
Oh, wow. How did that, because imagine as you scale up from like a small vat to like a massive one, did you have issues that you ran into?
Yes.
What were some of those issues?
Yeah. When you take a batch, literally, because that's exactly what it is. You're in a vat that's a certain size and then you scale up that formula and you go from manufacturing 5,000, 10,000 units to 50,000. Like when you increase formulas, like things can go wrong like that.
It's weird because you think you just, okay, with a 10 times bigger thing, let's just times everything by 10, but it doesn't work out like that,
and
right?
it's also how you add them in together. Like certain orders, I've learnt so much now, but like certain orders of adding in ingredients will change stability, how things combine.
Oh, wow.
Like, there's a whole bunch of different factors. So it's no surprise that things can go wrong when you try and scale up. So we ended up writing off a chunk of product.
How much?
About 45,000 units of product because they went into the packaging and then started crystallizing. So
what's the conversation between like you and your mom or you and the team at that? Like you just have to accept those things when it happens,
100%.
right? But
yeah, I mean,
how
when
quick do you
you're
move on?
moving very fast.
Yeah.
Don't dwell on those things. Learn from them. Keep moving. It's like go into solution mode. It's a hurdle. Jump over it. Like, you know what I mean? You just got to find your way through. If you dwell on, obviously you have to figure out what happened, why it happened, so then you make sure it doesn't happen again. But aside from that, like don't get caught up on it. Just keep moving, because when you're moving that fast, the guarantee is that something will go wrong.
It'll have to, right?
Yeah.
It'll have to. And then as long as I'm okay I hate making mistakes in not just in business, but in life, if I can't take a lesson out of it.
Yeah.
If you can take a lesson out of it,
Yep.
you know, it hurts when they're really expensive lessons.
Yep.
But as long as you can take a lesson out of mistake, I feel like it's just part of the process and it's a good thing.
It is part of the process, how you learn.
It actually brings me on to another question I usually ask brands. That might be it, obviously. It could be an obvious one, but there might be something else. And the reason I ask this because like when you make an expensive mistake, you really learn that lesson.
Yeah.
So my thoughts, if I ask a lot of e-com brands or, you know, retail brands, what's one of your biggest money like costing mistakes, and people hear a bunch of all them, hopefully they can avoid making those sorts of mistakes themselves.
Yep.
But is it that, or does another like big money costing mistake? And I know they're not losses because they're lessons, but is there anything you can think of that you wasted money that you didn't need to? And it's like, okay, that's a lesson. I won't do that again in the future.
Yeah, I feel like back in the early days, we had a lot of sort of lessons where, you know, we went, okay, like Meta's working really well for us. If we put in X amount of money, we always sort of average this type of return on ad spend. So let's just turn on another channel. Let's call it these days. Maybe you go, okay, well, we could achieve the same on TikTok. For us, we thought we could do the same on Google ads, which is hilarious in hindsight. But we dumped about like 15 grand into Google ads in like a month to test, which back then was huge money, and it just went like completely down the drain.
For skincare, it's a very competitive place, I imagine.
So competitive. And also it's not particularly high intent. Like you've got people discovering through Google, but there's like a big piece between like, you know, someone searching
That's
for
true.
like a problem and then actually buying
That's
something.
true.
Whereas if you're like, you know, flower delivery in Sydney, like you're probably going to buy off a search. You know what I mean? With skincare, is that conversion is not that fast.
It's not really a thing because like if I think of myself, and obviously I'm a male, I'm assuming, you know, it's still similar for female. But if I want to buy a new skincare thing, which I've been doing recently, I don't type skincare and then click Google shopping like I do with another product, right?
Exactly.
But I wouldn't have thought that until you say it. But now you say it, it's like, okay, yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
So go back to like, how's the customer going to interact, right? With the platform, with the media. Like if we had really asked ourselves back then I don't know if we would have made that decision.
But it's a great example of how you had to make that mistake to learn that.
Yeah.
We just talked about some amazing things, obviously, like the Priceline launch and the Coles launch. When you look back now and you're trying to be more appreciative and grateful for where you're at, is there any moment or day that stands out as like the most rewarding day of your business journey so far?
Wow, that's a nice question. I'm trying to think. Most rewarding. I'd have to say it's like something to do with the team. I don't know, like when I think these days it's also much easier to celebrate because you see everyone else around you like celebrating.
Yeah.
And then I get so much joy through like seeing them celebrate and achieve like in their own roles and in their like sort of like how much they love coming to work and doing their jobs is more sort of like where I get my wins from now.
That's cool.
But I think like when we finished the year at 22 mil and it was like that was such huge growth on the previous year. I think we all looked around and we were like, okay, like we have slaved. Like a lot of people have seen it as, you know, like an overnight boom. Particularly for TBH, I feel like a lot of people sort of saw it came out of nowhere from 2022, sort of end of 2022. But there was so much work before that was like, you know, us slogging away, putting everything on the line. Like we, like I said, risked a lot of money. Like you went all in. So it's like there was so much that predated that. But to get to that point of like, it's 22 mil, we've got like 28 people in this team. We're in like this, you know, beautiful office in the city. And like we have all of these exciting opportunities now ahead of us. It's like, yeah, crazy.
Is there any element, because like it's really easy to point to, great, you know, amazing decks, did really good on the pitches, obviously going in and signing with a Priceline or a Coles, you know that's going to increase your growth a lot. And you can look at all the amazing videos you create for organic and ads. But is there anything, because you mentioned there was so much work that goes on beforehand, is there any part of the process that you think is underappreciated by entrepreneurs that they don't get the glamour like a really good advertising campaign that you think that actually was the dirty work that, I didn't make a video on my Instagram or TikTok about, but was actually really important to building the foundation of a really strong brand?
Customer insights, like focus groups. I ran focus groups at the beginning of TBH, and I did it again when we merged with BoostLab. Like, I will sit around a table in a room with customers and ask them questions.
How do you organize your focus groups?
I literally just ask people, like, do you know someone in their, 50s who would be happy to come in for, a $50 Adore Beauty voucher to,
Yeah.
like chat to us for an hour about skincare or beauty. And it's like you just get them in a room. Honestly, the gems of insights that you can come across, they've been the deciding factors of whether we've, done certain ambassador partnerships or, put money into certain ads or who we've targeted. Like, it's all been decided off the customer. And if you don't run the focus groups, like, go look in customer service, go look at your reviews. Like, that work, in my opinion, is like the pinnacle of what will make or break your business.
And I think that's definitely, it's a perfect answer because it is something that is underappreciated or it's not really thought about with e-com. Like, a lot of people in e-com, we want to get the answers that you can get by inviting 10 people to have a table and giving them a $50 voucher.
Yeah.
Like, let me go spend thousands of dollars of ads and we'll buy how, the conversion rate of these ads or the response to certain things. We'll make our decisions based off that, when you actually can get a much better understanding and launch better ads the right products just by spending a little bit of time with customers before that.
It's like that classic, like, we are in this era of digital marketing and we have so much data. Data. Like, there's personas here and a persona there and all of this stuff.
Yep.
And you can get so swept away with that. And I think you got to match that with like the subjective element of like, get the customer in the room, get like the feeling. I'm such a traditional brand marketer. Like, I'm like, but how does it make them like feel in a room? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But I feel like that is, people buy off emotions. They buy off, like, that's how they make all of their decisions. So you need to get into the customer psyche to like actually understand how to market to them.
Yeah, I think that's really good. That's really underrated. You're clearly a brilliant like marketer, obviously digital marketer as well, is where you do a lot of your work. And I know I'm putting you on the spot and you don't get any of these questions before. I only literally prep these today. But can you think of any of the strategies or campaigns over, let's say the last 12 months, say 2024, that have worked really well for you guys, just off the top of your head?
It's a good question. Look, I think organic TikTok for TBH has obviously been like pretty revolutionary. It costs nothing. It's a big sort of headcount cost for us. Like, the biggest part of our marketing team is content. But I believe that you're only as good as your content. Like, even with ads.
Yeah.
Like, I reckon it's 90% content.
It is,
People will come for me probably for saying that, but I reckon it's 90% content, 10% where you put it.
Yeah.
And I've seen that over and over again. So I think, organic TikTok for TBH is like, and for any business, I say, like, if you've got no money, go spend all your time trying to find your community, like, on TikTok. And then for BoostLab, like, it is that understanding of the customer and then serving them ads like that are so directed to the problem they're experiencing and then giving them such a clear solution, with an ambassador that they relate to. Yeah. I mean, like, if you get that right, then you're away.
Yeah, it is. I say this all the time. I say 80%, but I wouldn't fight back, like push back on you saying 90%. But particularly the way the algorithms have changed over the last, say, 3-4 years, it is becoming like less like structured in terms of it's as important how you structure and set up all your campaigns. Like, if you just have amazing content, you'll do well, right?
Yeah. Well, we see it like, so, I mean, we work with an incredible agency and they buy our media so well. Like, I can't claim to, like, I probably say that because I take for granted.
Because you don't have to go do it. Yeah.
Because they're
You'll get a message from them after this. Like, excuse me.
But at the same time, when we've handed them a piece of creative, our CPA will go from if it's really good, our CPA goes from $30 to $9.
Wow.
Like, genuinely, that just happened in the business.
Yeah.
So creative is everything.
Because then really, if your CPA goes down like to a third of the cost, everything else stays the same. You're so much more profitable instantly.
Yeah. And then also just plug in a lot more money. Like, and what we've seen is when the creative's that good, you can scale it. Like you don't even lose the efficiency as you scale. It doesn't even fatigue.
So what are the best pieces of content that specifically for you guys now? Like no, just like anything that's where I know everyone's like, oh, UGC this or founder, blah, blah. Like, is there anything, because people always, like, well, what can I go and take? How can I steal Rachel's best ideas and put into my business? Like, is there anything that like is working really well now?
Yes. Clear, like, so I would say in an ad, like for BoostLab, it's like clear problem solution, one SKU only. I would say like that's key to like good, high performing, high converting content is like, don't overcomplicate it. Don't put too many messages in. It's like one problem, one solution with one product. People don't have the capacity to take in any more information than that. And then make it as like organic as you can. So like unpolished, unfiltered, talking to the customer with like where they're at, literally how they would talk to a friend.
Yeah.
Depends what industry you're in. Depends again, does a customer want to hear? Like that was an insight I got from the focus group was when we went around the room with the BoostLab customer and said, what's your favorite beauty product you're using right now? That was just an icebreaker question, right? It was the first question we asked. And they went around the room and they started saying, oh, like I picked up this thing from Sephora. I don't even know what the name is. This redness corrector thing, blah, blah, blah. And I watched everyone else write down what they were using. And they didn't even know that person. And they were like, wait, what is it? Where'd you get it? Oh, I'm going to try it.
Wow.
And I was like, hang on a minute. They just want all of their recommendations from their peers. So from people who look like them, who are their age. Like they didn't even need to know who that person was to trust them, right? So it was like that we've taken that into ads. It's like they have their everyday woman, their peer, telling them what problem they had, the solution they found, one simple message, one product, and then that's it, and a result.
So let's just say for one of your products, there's 5 main benefits to the user, right?
Yeah.
A lot of people, when they make their ads, they want to get all 5 in. So you think it's better one.
What's the biggest pain point? Like what is going to be the biggest, like for a customer to go like, oh, that's the problem I have. I need the solution. Like just the one.
And the good thing is you don't need to even like take your word for it necessarily, because let's go for all the top ones. Let's make a really strong video on each, and then let's try a mashup with, someone talking about 3 or 4 benefits, and the algorithm will show you what's the best anyway, right?
Yeah.
So it's just about how can you create more content that's really good, that speaks to the customer's key needs, wants, fears. What are they really missing from their lives? So I think that's really cool. We're in Black Friday period right now. What did the Black Friday prep look like for TBH?
That's a good question.
Like we had Adam and Rachael on from do you know who was Elijah? And it's like for Black Friday, they've got like 12 SKUs or something like that. And they've got 20 different pillars, and they make 5 pieces of content for every pillar, for every product. So it's like they just had to prep 900 pieces of content. So for them, it's very much just creating assets. But I'm keen because you're also at a like same sort of level of a brand as them. What does it look like for you? Because some people hear that and be like, I could never. But I'm curious, maybe it's completely different for you.
Yeah, we probably took a little bit more of a lean approach actually to this year's Black Friday. We, I know it sounds funny because we've got 16 people in marketing, but we've had a lot on with other things. So we've launched like a lot of new product. There's a lot of stuff in the pipeline for next year as well. So we wanted to try and keep Black Friday as lean as we could.
Yeah.
Also whilst making sure we get it right because it is the most important seasonal part of the year.
Yeah.
So for TBH, it was, a huge stockpile of ad creative, and that was split into hype creative, like launch creative, mid-sales, like creative, and then final hours creative. So we actually staged the pieces of content for the sales cycle because it's quite a long period.
Yeah.
So you need to like keep it fresh. And then in terms of like buying media as well across that period, like make sure you're like sort of being strategic in how you're doing that. So yeah, it was getting all that done, figuring out what the mechanics were for each part of the sales cycle. So making sure it wasn't just like boring essentially for the customer, like how are we incentivizing early access was important. We put the site behind a password and offered like a discount that was only available for that 24 hours. And then when we made it live to the public, the discount changed. So unless you were in early access, you missed that.
Yeah.
So driving like that loyalty as well with our VIPs and subscribers, using own channels like email and SMS are amazing.
I'd
And
imagine
then-
that's a really important channel for a brand like you guys that, you know, have so many repeat customers.
Yeah.
You can get and you don't have, there's no or very low acquisition cost to win back previous customers,
Yeah,
right?
no. And even customers that are sitting there waiting in the wings, you know, like then they're wondering.
Everyone stops spending late October. They're like, it's Black Friday around the corner. I'm just going to save my money.
Yeah. And hyping fast really works as well.
Yeah.
Like actually a lot of people are really scared to hype because you sacrifice that revenue.
In the days leading up.
Yeah. And like the week leading up, it's like crickets.
Yeah.
But that's all building.
Yeah.
And it is like, in my opinion, it's really worth doing. So yeah, it was like, prepping all of those own channels and then prepping all of the levers that we were going to pull through the different parts of the Black Friday cycle. Yeah.
That's really cool to hear it like broken down into stages. Yeah. And because then it's like, we always want to be creating like urgency at every moment. And it's like, if we just have the same message all the way throughout, by the end of the second week or third week, it's going to be like, I've kind of been hearing the same shit already. It's like, you know, so that's really cool. That's a unique take that I haven't had anyone explain like that. So that's really cool. One thing I want to talk about while we got you here is like your NPD. What's the process for your new product development? You mentioned you've had a lot of new launches, but before you talk about, we don't even really need to go into detail about the sampling and the rounds. Like, I'm sure people can kind of imagine what that looks like, but more what I'm curious, and I imagine your focus groups are a big part of it, knowing you now. How do you think about and identify what new products we're going to launch next? Like, do you have research processes? Do you have a product criteria? How do you work that out? Because I think that's more beneficial than just, okay, so we do 6 rounds of samples, blah, blah, blah.
No,
you know what I mean?
Yeah. So we start with a marketing brief. So marketing owns NPD.
Okay, cool.
In terms of what products we want to bring out. And we get that from customer service. So is a big part because there's a lot of people that say, I love this, but I wish I had this in your range to use with it. And so our customer service team will like stockpile
Always
all of
collate
those requests.
Nice.
Yeah. So we go there. I've also sent out surveys a lot to customers. So across BoostLab and TBH, I'll send out surveys that ask them about what their biggest concerns are at the moment, or not necessarily overtly asking them what products they're looking for, but like, because I like to lead with problem first and not solution, because sometimes customers don't even know what they want.
Yeah.
But yeah, what are their biggest problems and concerns with their skincare? Looking obviously at what education is coming up in the market and sort of like what's trending, I think that is very valuable to have insight on, but it's not where we make all of our decisions off.
Yeah.
So it's like, what are our customers purchasing and loving using in the market? What are they looking for? And then what are their biggest problems? And then based off that, which comes through customer service or surveys or focus groups, we then decide like, okay, we think this product is the right one to bring into the range. And then we create a marketing brief to say, this is what it needs to do. This is the problem it needs to solve. This is how we want it to feel. This is the packaging we want it to be in this price point. And then that gets sent off to our like ops side of the business, which then they would have like the technical brief put together from the marketing brief. That's when they get a formulator to go, okay, well, if you're wanting to achieve X, Y, Z, this is the actual formula that I would recommend.
And what's that sort of in terms of how much time that takes from the first, okay, you're obviously collecting all the data, but when you go, okay, I'm consciously going to go and review this with the thought of like releasing a new product to, it's gone through the marketing brief, gone through like the operational, more technical brief to, hey, we've got the product and we're going to go into like a hype building stage for launch. Is it 6 months? Is it a year?
12 months.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's a long process. And these days, like we could probably operate more off the fly earlier on. Like new product development would have taken us maybe 6 months back in the day. But the bigger you get, like you've got more sort of checks and balances to make, I think. Like I think, we would then make sure we're doing things like patch testing or, there's different things that come into it when you're that scale and you need that lead time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I want to move on and just get some, we'll start to wrap up. It's been an hour 15 already. I want to get some like really good like advice or like out of you just from some of your experiences, because a lot of the people that listen are interested in starting their own business or they do have their own business and they're looking for advice to like try and scale. One thing before we go into that though is I know you've had experience raising equity in a few different ways. So friends and family, great.
Yeah.
You've done the crowdsourcing and you've gone through the process of like some more serious investment PE firms, that sort of thing. And I think I was listening to a podcast of you and you're talking about, okay, I'd go to a meeting and then every time I'd go to a meeting, I'd change things on my pitch or change things on my deck. I guess what I want to know here is when you're talking to investors, what do they really want to know? And what are you going and changing and making better every time you make sort of improvements to either the pitch or the deck?
Okay, I think investors want to know what's the problem that you're solving, what is the solution and why is it different to everyone else, and why are you the person to build it? I think those are probably the key things. Things like size of market potential, roadmaps, like how you're actually going to do it. Obviously, you build all those things in. But at the crux of it, like what is it that you're doing? Why is it different? And then why? I think investors invest in people. I heard on a panel before, like the investors, when they invest in founders, they need to know that that founder is going to attract a certain level of talent one day for people to come and work for them. They've got to be the one that people will actually rally behind.
Yeah.
So it's a very important part for the investors to know who they're investing in and back the people as well. And so I think that like if you can demonstrate why you're that person, the story behind that, your skill set, but also like your investment in solving the problem, then they know that when things get tough, you're going to be the one that pulls through.
Were you aware of how much you were selling you versus the product when you first started that?
It was subliminal. Like as in I as you can probably tell, I'm quite an excitable person. So when I was talking to investors, like my heart was so in it because I'm obsessed with the business and I was backing it because I think if you can't back it, then no one will. And so I think I realized in hindsight how important that level of investment from me was in like those investor pitches.
But I think it's similar to, obviously your focus groups is a really good way to do it. But like before even doing that, I think some people don't even go to the level of like, okay, let me just take myself out of the business for a second. If I was a customer, what would I need to see to make me realize, hey, this is a problem I have and I need to fix it, right?
Yeah.
Think of it the same way. Like if you now you've made good money and you've done all this, if you were going to go invest in a business, what are you really going to be looking for more? I reckon 80-90% is who the founder is, right? Because it's all in the execution. I'm sure you've seen many good ideas and all these brilliant things and they pop up and they were there for 6 months, a year and they're gone because for whatever reason they failed. I think it's just another example of that. But talking about, I mentioned a lot of people that are listening and the reason I know is because I do a bit of mentoring or quite a lot of mentoring with people starting their own businesses. And often it was not like your example where you come across a product and you're like, oh, that looks good and you started it. Often people think about starting their own business or going out on their own or they've had this dream for months, if not years.
Yeah.
And for some reason they just have that little internal blockage that's stopping them. What's your advice to people that have been thinking about doing something for themselves for forever and they just haven't been able to find the courage or the right product to do it?
Well, I always say you miss 100% of the shots you don't take. It's like my favorite life motto. So if you're not going to do it, are you okay with never knowing what would have happened?
That's good.
And so if you're okay with like never finding out, then don't do it. But you know what I mean? Like as in you're going to sit there like progress over perfection always. Mm-hmm. You might go out and it might not work. Like, are you going to be richer for that experience? Like probably you're going to learn a lot. And I think there's a lot to like be said about the people who actually do put themselves out there and take that risk. Like it does take a lot of courage, but don't go foolishly. Like go in eyes wide open, understand where you might fall down and then be brave enough to go anyway.
I think there has to be an element of self-awareness because intuitively connected with like what is going to eat you up if you don't do it because the way you frame it, it's really good. It reminds me of a quote, a Robin Williams quote, but the way you framed it, if you're okay with not knowing, then fine. Yeah. But I feel like to me, you just saying that, I'm like, oh, that would eat me up. You 100%. Know what I mean? There's this Robin Williams quote. Before I got into business many, many years ago, I did acting for a while. And there was this like quote from Robin Williams that said like, don't be an actor unless you need to be an actor. I'm like, well, who needs to be an actor, right? I obviously stopped acting and got into business. Now I'm like, oh fuck, like I couldn't not be in business if I tried. So I get that. And it's okay to realize that just because entrepreneurship's cool right now doesn't necessarily mean it has to be for you.
Yeah, 100%. Like and I think you have to reckon with why. Like why are you doing it? Like what's behind that? Because it has to be like a genuine passion and obsession for like what's involved in building something. Like I think for me, like I love to build like things and I love the challenge and I love the thrill and I love, going like, oh my God, how are we ever going to make it through this? And also, oh my goodness, here are all the exciting things that we could be doing and like that thrill. But if that's not you, then don't force yourself into that.
100%. But it's like,
because for some people that's a nightmare. That's like their worst sort of fears. And like a lot of people wouldn't actually necessarily want to be in that type of environment every day. That would be like not fun.
Exactly. What's the saying? What's the saying? It's like, if you like, I'm going to butcher it completely. You've probably heard it, but I don't know the start exactly. Something like if you can't pay the price, like if you don't like the price of failure, wait till you get the bill for regret.
Yeah, that's a good one.
It's like, what's going to hurt you more, not doing it?
Yeah.
And like you realizing, hey, I'm now 10 years older and my life's completely different. I now don't have the freedom to go and do that.
Yeah.
Or, you go and you try and start a business and you lose 10, 20 grand and you figured out, hey, maybe I'm not going to be in business or maybe I found this new passion. But it's like.
But you don't die wondering.
You don't die wondering.
Yeah.
Right. People always say to me, because when I started the business, I started with a business partner who ended up leaving after like a year, but we both put in 10 grand each.
Yeah.
Both put in 10 grand each. And by the time I put that 10,000 in, I had less than $1,000 in my bank account. And everyone goes, oh, Dylan, wasn't that such a big risk? Like, how did you do it? And I like genuinely never thought of it as a risk because it's like, I already knew working my corporate job, I wasn't happy.
Yeah. Okay.
So it's like, what am I risking? Yeah. If I work another year, maybe I'll have $20,000 in my bank account. Like, who cares?
Yeah. And I think you're right. Like you need to be wired that way though, I think.
Yeah, I think so.
Because if stability is more important to you and that 20 grand in your bank account is something you need to feel at peace, I guess, like, you know what I mean? For some people that is really important, but then maybe don't or go about it a different way. Like you need different safeguards like sort of in place. But yeah, it's interesting. I never had that moment of like, oh God, do I do it? I was like, I can't not do it.
Yeah.
Like I would kick myself. I let this opportunity go. Like, no way. I made that decision in a heartbeat.
Yeah.
Like it was maybe within 2 weeks I found it and call it a month. I found out about the tech. Then like a month later quitting my job.
Yeah.
Like probably not enough time to really consider all of the
lucky you didn't think about it too long.
Wrong.
I remember, like, I still remember when I had to, because I think back then we paid like, even, I don't know, but when we had to pay the bulk remainder of the stock, I had to transfer more money into the business account.
Yeah.
And I remember thinking then, oh, fuck, it's real now. But then it's like, but I just got to do it. You know what I mean?
Do it.
You got to
then
do
your
it.
back's up against the wall.
100%. I feel like, again, it depends how you're wired, but if you're wired in the way you sort of need to be for business, it's unfortunate that sometimes it takes your back to be against the wall to get the best out of you. It's just human nature, but it often does.
Yeah. Diamonds made under pressure.
Exactly. Yeah. It's interesting though. But I think like, if you've been thinking about it for years, then you have to try.
Yeah. Or accept the fact, like you gotta move. So you gotta move forward in some way. Like
right?
Whether that is, this is not for me or I'm putting it on the shelf for later maybe, but like that indecision, the constant indecision of like, do I, don't I, do I, don't I?
That's
like
the worst, right?
And also what are you achieving in that period? Like where you're not moving, you're stagnant, like pick one way or the other.
And you're just tormenting yourself. Yeah. And like whichever way you pick, if you get 3 months in or 6 months in or 12 months in and realize it wasn't the right one, okay, well, you now know that wasn't the thing.
Yeah, well, you'll be further ahead than where you are today.
You will guarantee you'll be further ahead. And I just think, too many people get stuck. And I feel like mentally for our own like sanity, that like spiraling this way, that way, that's the worst place to live.
Exhausting.
It's exhausting.
Yeah.
But you mentioned a good example and like, I was 24 when I started the business. You're 23,
I was 23, yeah.
You don't really think about risk as much, I think, when you're in your like early 20s.
If you've got a family and you've got a mortgage, like you have other things to consider.
It is different. It is 100% different. You mentioned like put safeguards in the place. And this is an analogy that I give a lot now. Before, when I had $10,000 in my bank account, what safeguard? I lived at home with my parents.
Yeah.
I maybe had $500 a month to pay for my card, like in a phone. Like that was all my expenses. So it was pretty low risk. But now the way I like to operate, because now we do have something to lose, the way I play business and life now is like, who wants to be a millionaire? You know how like you get up to like 32,000 and then if you go up and then you can only fall back to that, and then you get up to like 250 and you can only so the way I set up my life is that like you have to be able and willing to lose money in business and take risks. But I've set up a few levels because now that I know I can never go back to where I was when I started.
Yeah.
So it's like, if you have to work a little bit harder and spend an extra 3 months or 6 months to save that extra buffer, do that and do that intentionally, and then know from there, okay, anything above that, I'm playing the game now.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. No, agreed. You need to know, where you're comfortable, sort of like, where's your minimum, where's your maximum? Like, you know what I mean? Like but it is hard because then you also have to know, okay, well, if I do spend 30 grand, let's say, and I've got my buffer of 20, that when I lose that 30 grand, I'm not then going to go and spend that 20. Like, do you know what? You're never going to know till you're in that situation, but that's why I say like.
But maybe you lose the 30 and then realize, fuck it, I'm putting the 20 in, I'm all in now.
Well, exactly.
Which is still the progress you're talking about.
Yeah, I know. Then you have that clarity, I guess, on like what you're willing to put in. Yeah, I don't know. It's a complicated one because I think it's so personal.
It is. You don't seem like someone that has much. Do you ever have moments of doubt?
Yes.
How do you get through them? How do you process it?
Well, you say you don't seem like I think a lot of people would think that. No, I doubt myself all the time. How do I get through that? I think like the most part I've ever doubted myself is actually with leading the team.
Okay.
And so I just had I had a lot to work through, I think, to figure out that was like, it was okay for me to be like vulnerable with the team. Like, I think it's been helpful for them to realize that I'm not like a robot. And, like, I think I've worked through that by just verbalizing, I think, like what I'm feeling and going through and seeking counsel in the right places. And I've had very supportive people like around me the whole time.
Yeah.
But then at the end of the day, like, again, you got to shoot your shot, like, or it's gone. Like, and I always say, like, who does that harm? Like, as long as you're not hurting anyone, then like you backing yourself doesn't actually do anyone else harm. Actually, you doubting yourself is often at time causing more problems, like along the way.
I would say like 95% of the problems.
Yeah.
Right? And like the human nature as well. One of the worst things we do is we pre-stress and pre-worry about problems that don't even come true anyway.
Oh yeah, that's me to a T.
So you just have to just let go and just put trust in the process so that if the problem does come up, you'll be capable of solving it. Exactly.
Yeah, back yourself to solve whatever goes wrong.
Yeah.
It's very funny because I'm a very anxious person in my personal life. Like I have such bad anxiety, but in business, not so much.
Yeah. For me, a big thing, been a big part of my journey has been visualization, the law of attraction, manifestation, whatever you want to call it.
Okay.
And if I feel like I can visualize something clearly enough and I want it enough, I say when I do my visualizations, it feels like time travel.
Yeah.
Because I'm there and I'm experiencing it. And then Mel told me something, I think, I don't know, on a podcast or something heard, or maybe it was just a TikTok, I don't know. But it resonated with me and I'm like, okay, yeah, I can kind of buy into that. Like for the things that you want so much, sometimes, not sometimes, this is the theory, you want it so much because in the future you already have it. So like you long for it, you know what I mean? It's like if I'm ever feeling a little bit lost and I just connect, not what I wanted 3 years ago when I set a goal.
Yeah.
What do I now really care about? What do I really want now? Not anyone else, not your business partner, not your partner, not your mom, not your dad, not anyone.
Yeah.
What do you really want right now? Connect with that. And if you can like go to that place for me, it fixes 90% of the problems.
Yeah.
But have you been like a visualizer or a manifestor, whatever you want to call it at all?
Not majorly. Like, what would I say? Like, I think I'm very much like the creative type where I get like lost in my own thoughts and sort of like visions for the brand and the business and stuff. And I think it's more like my excitement that has gotten me through that. And I actually read something recently where they say like the best way to overcome fear is to turn it into excitement. Because if you try and fight fear with like, if you try and suppress fear, it actually like gets stronger. So if you go like, oh, I feel scared, don't feel scared, like, or, you know, I'm nervous, be confident or whatever, like that actually exacerbates like that problem or that feeling that you have. But if you level fear with excitement and you go like, actually, I'm excited to do it. There's like clinical there's psychology around this where they took a group and told them to, I think, sing in front of a crowd, and few people said nothing. The other group said, I'm scared, and the other group said, I'm excited. And the group that was excited, like it improved their performance by like a crazy amount of percent.
Yeah. And I think I've seen other things like supporting this where it's like anxiety and excitement physically, they're almost identical anyway.
Yes, so you're not
So
actually
it's all
suppressing.
perception.
Yeah, you're not suppressing the physiological things that are happening in your body. You're turning the anxiety into excitement.
Exactly. I think there's a lot of like cool like psychological things that I used to do. Well, I still do, but anyway, long story short, I spent like 8 years doing martial arts, right?
Yeah.
And what's so good? So it's like a mix of old school like Chinese like kung fu, like that the old like military used to use, right? So we've got that like cool like spiritual element to it that we got to learn. And the guy who was the head of our school had been like training people for 45 years. He's like one of the highest ranks in the world. His day job was a high performance psychologist for like entrepreneurs and athletes. So we got like a really good learning both kind of in like the spiritual and like ancient, like old school Chinese medicine sense with like new school anxiety. And when people, you know, we weren't like the martial arts place where like you go in and there's like egos and people just wanting to be like HKs, anything like that. But like one of the things he always used to say, because you just train to be ready just in case we ever needed to protect ourselves like in a real life scenario.
Yeah.
And often when that happens to people, I've never had to, you know, use any of my training or anything like that, thankfully. But when it happens, you get this adrenaline dump, and your adrenaline dump is like, you know, going back to like caveman times. It's what we need so we can run away from the lions but you think you're nervous and you're shaking, and then you start doubting yourself. Oh my God, like I've been training for all these years and now I'm like panicking in the moment. And when he said, no, recognize what your body is doing physically. It's doing that for you. It's all in the perception of what you say it is.
Yeah, exactly.
And if you can master that, then you can change any negative state into a positive.
Yeah.
But it's obviously a lot easier said than done. We're human beings, right?
So much easier said than done.
Sometimes, just the awareness of that can be the like sprout to eventually, you know, getting on top of that stuff. So I really loved your analogy though, but we'll wrap up. We've had you here for a while. Last couple questions. I know you're a big reader. You said you're not necessarily a big visualizer. I know you're a big reader.
Oh, I read constantly.
Do you have any favorite business books or like personal development books that you've read?
So many. I'll list a few off. So for brand, Cult Status by Tim Duggan, best book if you're like trying to figure out how to build brand for purpose.
Okay.
And like a brand that will cultivate that fandom that I was talking about. So Cult Status, incredible. A really good business book. It's sort of like just a general business book that sort of speaks about the experience of like running a business, is Ride of a Lifetime by Bob Iger, who's the CEO of Walt Disney. And like it's just his take on his career and experiences, and it touches on leadership and like doubting yourself, a whole bunch of different things. That book is incredible. I am reading The Originals by Adam Grant at the moment, and it's how like nonconformists change the world. And so like how people who think differently, like what are the core traits of all these people who have gone and done things so differently and disrupted categories and revolutionized things, like what do they all have in common? And it's not actually what you think they would.
Okay.
And that's where he's a psychologist, like a psychologist or like a researcher for psychology. And so it's all evidence-based, all of his stuff. So that book is amazing. And then I love just like a quick marketing. Oh, actually two more. Quick marketing one is The Purple Cow by Seth Rogen. Is that his name?
Rogen?
Yeah. Purple Cow.
What is it?
Purple Cow. It's a really good book on just like how to do marketing differently.
Yeah.
And then there's one, and I'm going to forget the name of it. It's by a group called the Category Pirates. It's like a whole group of people that write these books. And I bought it off Amazon. You can't even get a hard copy in Australia. But it's the 22 Laws of Category Design. It's phenomenal for thinking about if you're launching a product into market, what do you actually need to do at like a product or business level to make it different? But they go in terms of like creating entirely new categories, sort of different. Like I love the way they think. Anyway, those are all my top ones.
What's your favorite business book? Like, do you have one like? You've obviously read Shoe Dog, I imagine, right?
No. But give me all of them because I eat them
Well,
up.
Shoe Dog is like, I used to be a massive reader. The last 18 months, I've probably read like 3 books. So I've really slipped. But Shoe Dog is the story of Nike.
Oh, okay, right. Yeah, cool.
The reason I love Shoe Dog and I recommend it to people all the time is because, you know, the sort of, you know, vibe that e-com attracts sometimes is it's overnight success. It's easy money. You know, the drop shippers, it's like 10 grand profit in your first month or all this stuff.
Which, to be fair, is true, but it's not long. I'll just say it's not longevity. So if you want quick money in, you're not building for
it's not longevity, but it's also like the people that really achieve that is like it's one in a it's a fraction. And the ones that do it today in 2024 as we move into 2025, the only people that make proper money drop shipping are the ones that have been doing it for 5-6 years and they're testing 20, 30 products a week. But my point is you read this book, you'll love it. It's such a good book. How they weren't profitable for like the first 20 years.
Yeah.
They had crises and things come up that should have put them out of business so many times. And he just never gave up. And then he changed from being like a distributor to creating his own brand and rebranding it. And like he should have went out of business so many times, and just hearing how many like, you know, revolutions the brand went through. And then when they finally started having success and still everyone was trying to like take them out and keep them down. And he just didn't let it stop him. Anyone else would have given up 100 times, but just read that book. I actually listened to it on Audible. I loved it so much, bought it and read it again straight away after. It's just like, I'm sure you'll get tactics out of it and everything like that. But sometimes I just like to read for the enjoyment, and just like the overarching message of that was like, it's still stuck with me today. You'll love it. Yeah,
that's
it's so
like
good.
the ride of a lifetime one. That's not necessarily tactical.
I thought you were when you mentioned it's about that. I thought you were going to say that. That's why I mentioned it.
But I would say Cult Status is my favorite, and that is very tactical.
Cool.
Like it's got
Cult
exercises
Status.
at the end of each chapter, and I think it's the most valuable book. When I talk about like get the people in a room and figure out how it makes them feel, that book is like the essence of that, I feel.
What do you think of for like more like sales and office structure? Like do you know Alex Hormozi? Have you read his books?
No.
You'll like them. It's really simple. Like he's like really around like sales and conversion and structuring offers, like $100 million offers and $100 million leads. Like it's
interesting.
It's like the more practical. I think you'll enjoy him. I just think he's brilliant with like sales.
Okay.
And obviously like you're a brand-led
I'm a brand-led person,
but still
massively.
I feel like the commercial tactics that you could just little things that you could take, I'm sure would add a lot of value.
Yeah.
But what can people expect to see out of you and TBH and York Street Brands for the next little bit?
We'll hopefully take a breath over Christmas.
That would be nice.
And then, lots on in the new year. So some international stuff, still new products, a few other new things as well. But exciting. That's all I'm going to say. But it's very exciting. And where can they find both yourself and TBH online? So TBH is at TBH Skincare on TikTok, or at TBH Skincare with an underscore on Instagram. And I am Rachael Wilde on Instagram. There you go. Well, that was great. An hour, 40 minutes flown. I love doing these with people that are like currently growing one of Australia's like, you know, fastest growing or the best like e-com brands. It's so cool to have people in it like while they're going through it rather than just like, okay, you've done it and sold. I think it's great. So much value in this. So thank you so much, Rachael, for coming in. I know it's busy this time of year. No, I'm really looking forward to the second half of December so we can have a little bit of a break as well. Me too. And sleep. But yeah, that was awesome. Thank you so much. Really appreciate it. Thank you. Thanks for having me. All right, guys. Thank you so much for listening. If you made it this far, I really, really, really honestly appreciate you. And I'm going to ask you for 2 favors. First favor, drop me a comment of one thing you learned or something that stood out from this episode. And then if you did and you learned something and you took something from it, do me a favor, share it with a friend, share it to your story, get the word out there. The bigger the podcast gets, the better guests that we get on more and more often. Thank you so much. I'll see you in the next one.